So, have you ever wondered what that invisible force is, the one that makes one company just take off, while another one, with all the same resources, just flops? It's not just about having a great strategy or the smartest people. It's about culture. Today, we're going to decode those unwritten rules that really answer the question in any workplace. So how do we actually get things done around here?
And this quote, wow, it really says it all, doesn't it? I mean, think about it. You can have the most perfect, detailed strategy and hire all the brilliant minds you want. But if the underlying culture is misaligned, you're basically building a skyscraper on sand. It's just not going to last. Real, enduring success, it doesn't just involve culture, it starts with it.
Okay, so what happens when that culture goes completely wrong? You know, when there's this huge gap between what everyone expects to happen and what's actually happening on the ground? Well, to see that in action, we've got to look at one of the most incredible turnaround stories in modern manufacturing.
So picture this. It's the early 1980s. There's this General Motors plant in Fremont, California, and it is a total disaster. I mean, absenteeism is through the roof, the quality is awful, and the whole place is just toxic. GM finally throws in the towel and shuts it down. But then something amazing happens. They reopen it as a joint venture with Toyota, and they call it Nummi. And here's the crazy part. They use the very same factory, and they rehire a ton of the exact same workers. The results? Absolutely night and day. Productivity literally doubled, and the quality went from being the worst in the entire company to the very, very best. So, what was the secret sauce? It wasn't the building. It wasn't even the workers. It was the culture. But that just begs the question, right? What exactly is this powerful, almost invisible force that can take the exact same ingredients and turn total failure into massive success?
Yeah, it's way more than just some catchy mission statement you see on a poster in the lobby. We're talking about the deep-down, fundamental DNA of how an organization really, truly operates. The best way to think about it is like an organization's personality. You know, it's all those unwritten rules of the game that everyone just gets. It's what dictates everything from how you run a meeting to what happens when somebody messes up. And it is the critical factor that determines whether a brand new tech startup or, say, a huge public agency is actually going to thrive in the long run.
Okay, but that right there is the big problem, isn't it? If this culture thing is so invisible and intangible, how in the world are you supposed to diagnose it? And forget that, how do you even begin to change it? Well, to do that, you need a way to make the invisible visible. You need a map.
And the map we're going to use is this really powerful tool. It's called the Competing Values Framework, and it was designed for this exact purpose, to help us see, navigate, and understand organizational culture.
So this framework, it's built on two key tensions that every single organization has to deal with. First, think of a vertical line. At one end, you've got organizations that are really focused inward, on their people, their internal processes, and integration. On the other end, you've got those that are focused outward, on the marketplace, their competitors, and what's happening outside.
And then there's the second tension. Think of a horizontal line this time. On one side, you have organizations that value stability and control. They like rules, order, predictability. On the other side, you have organizations that value flexibility and freedom. They're all about being dynamic and letting people innovate.
So what happens when you put those two axes together? Well, you get this map. A map with 4 unique cultural quadrants. And each one of these quadrants represents a totally different way of working, a different style of leadership, and honestly, a different core belief about what makes an organization successful.
All right, let's take a quick tour of these 4 culture types. And as we go through them, I want you to think about your own job, your own team. Where do you think your workplace fits on this map?
First up, in the top left, we have the clan culture. This place is all about collaboration. It's friendly, it feels like an extended family, loyalty and tradition are what hold it all together, and you know you're successful when morale is high and teamwork is strong. Leaders here? They're mentors and facilitators, not top-down bosses.
Now, let's swing over to the top right. This is the adhocracy culture. This is where the disruptors live. It's dynamic, it's creative, it's super entrepreneurial. The whole point here is to be on the cutting edge, to invent new things, to innovate, and to grow. The leaders are visionaries, always pushing their teams to take smart risks.
Okay, down to the bottom right, we have the market culture.
Here, it is all about getting the job done. It's a results-driven, super competitive place where, frankly, winning is everything. Success is measured by hard numbers, market share, profitability, and the leaders, they're hard drivers, they're competitors, and they expect results.
And finally, in the bottom left, we have the hierarchy culture. You can probably picture this one pretty easily. It's that classic, structured, formal organization. What matters most here is stability, efficiency, and predictability. Everything is governed by clear rules and procedures, and leaders are the great coordinators, making sure the whole machine runs smoothly and on schedule.
All right, so now we've got our map with the 4 quadrants. But a map's not much good if you don't use it to figure out where you're going, right? So how do we actually use this thing to plot a course for our organization's future?
It all starts by creating 2 different pictures. First, you've got to get a really honest look at where your organization is right now. Then, and this is the key part, you work together to build a shared vision of where you need to be to succeed in the future. This is what coordinating expectations is all about.
So for example, let's take a public agency. They might use a tool to assess their culture and find out, yep, we are almost entirely a hierarchy culture. Everything revolves around rules, control, and keeping things stable.
But then they look at the future, and they realize that to meet the demands of the public they serve who want faster, more creative solutions, they need to change. Their preferred culture, the one they need to build, is much more innovative, more like an adhocracy, and also way more collaborative and people-focused, like a clan.
And this right here is probably the most important slide. That space between the 2 profiles, that gap between who you are now and who you want to be, that is your roadmap for change. Just making that gap visible to everyone is the crucial first step. It's how you start to coordinate those expectations and get everybody rowing in the same direction. Okay, so the gap is clear, everyone sees it. Now what? How do you actually bridge that gap and make change a reality? Well, the research lays out a pretty clear 6-step process. Of course, it starts with getting consensus on those now and future profiles. But what I find really cool is that it moves on to steps like identifying stories, real stories that illustrate the new culture you want. This makes the change feel tangible and real to people, long before you even get to writing up a formal action plan.
But you know, a roadmap and a plan only get you so far. The real engine of change is often way simpler. It's about the questions you ask. There's this fantastic idea called appreciative inquiry, and it basically says, instead of always focusing on what's broken, let's focus on what's working. So instead of asking, what's our biggest problem, a leader might ask their team, hey, tell me about a time when you felt totally energized and at your best here. The answers you get from that question, those are the real building blocks for the future you want to create.
So at the end of the day, changing a culture doesn't start with some perfect 100-page plan. It starts with a powerful question. It's about asking better questions to help coordinate everyone's expectations and build the future you all want, together. If you want to dive deeper into these tools and ideas, especially with how they apply to leadership in the public sector, the resources over at PublicWise.online are a really fantastic place to continue the journey.